Because WWE exists right now in a golden age of television, and they are not in it. Like, they're surrounded by all these great television shows, and it's not even just adult TV shows. It's not just Game of Thrones, it's not just Breaking Bad. Even kids' cartoons have this on lock. The kids' cartoons these days are in a golden age, and the WWE is just behind. They treat their
Yeah,
audience
I heard
like
about this. So, what was it? Legend of Korra. I heard some really
Legend
good
of
stuff about that
Korra,
show.
Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, like all these shows, they're aimed towards kids, but they don't look down on their audience, and they make it so that all audiences can enjoy it, kind of like Pixar almost. And WWE, I think their most fundamental problem, or at least one of them, the one that I want to focus on right now, is that they don't appreciate continuity and they don't appreciate their fans' intelligence because they don't let their fans have any fair shot at speculating what's going to happen because we don't ever know if this week continuity is going to matter or if it's not. And so Bray Wyatt could be fighting Dean Ambrose, and then several months later, he's fighting Roman Reigns. It's like, okay, can we expect Dean Ambrose to come out now, or are they just going to pretend Ambrose and Reigns aren't friends this week? Or if, like, Kane has a feud with someone, and then a year later, it's like, well, Kane didn't like this guy, now he's teaming up with him again. Shouldn't they address that? And I know a lot of this is just, oh, it's wrestling, but I don't think it has to be. I think, really, they have to have more respect for their audience because it lets their audience actually participate in, like, wondering what's going to happen next. But as it stands now, we have like no chance of figuring it out because there's no internal logic in the universe.
I got a question. I think can kind of like you can continue on this with, what side of the debate does kayfabe is dead fall on? Because if we, I'm not criticizing what you're saying. I'm just legitimately asking the question: what side of kayfabe is dead do we fall on? Because we're looking at the intelligence of fans, and fans are not dumb. Fans realize this is scripted entertainment, and with that in mind, are we being made to feel dumb because of kayfabe, because of storyline, or do we need to further pad that and continue to keep kayfabe as a thing? I just wonder, with your perspective.
Oh,
See, that can't be it though, because I look at kayfabe as the ticket that you have to buy to get into the building. There's no way in hell that you could possibly be a wrestling fan and be at odds with what is known as kayfabe. Like, I would say that kayfabe, as we know it, is probably dead, but the institution of kayfabe itself, it can't be dead because that's what wrestling is. Like, kayfabe is as old as the business itself. Maybe
Sure.
WWE needs to find some kind of way to reinvent it, but
I think they do.
I think,
I
yeah.
think that's one of the biggest keys. That's what I was going to elaborate on. So I'm all on the same page as you. I'm just saying that if we are talking about having our intelligence insulted, some fans think that it's like, oh, but we know it's scripted, so screw you. And that's where a lot of people kind of come from. And it's like, we're calling this the reality era, but yet, we're being made to look like morons a lot of times because they'll, not give us, not. It's not that they don't give us what we want, because you're never going to always get what you want. That's the bottom line. That's the truth of life. But it's that they start to do something that makes sense and then they go in another direction. They always seem to have this just up and down type of product that never continues along the same path. Like Steve was saying, the continuity is just not there, and that's where I think kayfabe should be redefined as being even more realistic. Now that we are in a golden age of technology, we are in a golden age of things like this, then let's utilize that. Not utilize it by hashtag this and hashtag that. Let's utilize it by in ways that you can make wrestling feel more real than ever before. And it's hard to just pinpoint and say you can do this, and this. I can't come up with 15 examples off the top of my head, but I know that company can do more things with kayfabe to make it feel more real. And maybe some of that goes into the fact that UFC and mixed martial arts are so popular. I'm not saying let's have MMA fights. I'm saying maybe the entrances are changed to maybe look like that when it's a main event time. I go back to Bobby Lashley versus Kurt Angle earlier this year. They had a world title match on TNA Impact Wrestling. I know it's like, oh, who cares about Impact? But it was not only was it one of the best matches of the year that no one realizes, but it had the coolest entrances that I've seen in years, and it was different. It felt like a big fight, and maybe these things need to feel like fights now, not just wrestling matches. And I know that continues to go along the point of, yeah, I get it, wrestling is storyline, and we all know that, but most of us here also want to preserve the fact that it's storyline. Most of us want to preserve the fact that it is a fight, but we want to make it feel like it's actually realistic. That's what us as fans want. And if you're going to have a crop of kids and another generation coming up, you want them to think that it's as real real as it is. And maybe they need to have more fights that actually or matches that feel like fights. And you notice I keep saying the word fight because maybe they need to have these types of things be a more prevalent part of wrestling. And I think that they can jump on that. But I still think...
and I say keep mentioning it, that fights thing, because that's something that I was thinking about going into Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins, because you had Seth Rollins, like WWE made it a point to force it upon you that this guy is weak and he's going into this match to get his ass kicked, and there's going to be something crazy that happens. Like, that's the only way that Seth Rollins could possibly win, and we see that. Like, nobody is talking about what happened between Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar anymore. They're all talking about what happened at the end of the match to basically screw the match. And that whole thing that you were talking about with fights, like, I wonder why, on a large scale, WWE doesn't really see the payoff in just having two people be built up strongly and those forces colliding. Like, I wonder why are we bogged down sometimes with a lot of the storyline BS that comes along with being in a top tier in WWE. That's why I've been so disaffected with a lot that goes on in that main event scene in WWE, because it's been so much bullshit. Like, we see a few like Kevin Owens and John Cena. Luckily, they've been able to get into the ring and have matches and things like that. But that
why is it such a rarity?
Lacking.
You
yeah,
know?
That's the thing. Like, why is that the exception and not the standard?
Exactly, because the interference is supposed to be something that happens unexpectedly. That's the point of the freaking story, element. That's something that you add to a storyline because you weren't expecting it, but now you are just waiting for it to happen. So they have clearly oversaturated that. But I still think that the biggest issue in WWE is because of the fact that they are complacent, and it's something that big companies are going to get because of the fact that there is no real competition. I don't think that they feel that they really need to worry about their throne. I think they feel very comfortable where they are, and they will do this thing where they'll give you a few big things, and that gets you to stick around, even though you complain 80% of the time or whatever, a lot of people do, at least. There's still going to be a few things that you love, a few things that make you mark out and keep you on the train. And as long as you're still riding on that train, and that train still has enough people riding on it, I don't know if they're going to really change their course. I just think they need to have something that hits them in the face before they're really going to, realize that. That's just where I see it from.
I just want to answer Evan's question. It was kind of a while ago, but you asked me, do you think kayfabe is the fact that kayfabe is dead, does that add to the fact that we're being insulted, or however you phrase the question? I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it's completely unrelated, because I think every wrestling fan, like Jay said, it's the ticket you buy to get in the building. You have to buy into this, otherwise you're not even going to be a fan in the first place. And I think every wrestling fan wants to get caught up in this. They want to be taken on a ride. They want to be allowed to get invested in a story. But the problem is they're constantly taken out of it because WWE has no commitment to their universe, and they go back and forth with continuity. They go back and forth with whether or not it's real or it's fake, or how badly they want to commit. And I do think kayfabe could come back stronger than it's ever been. I mean, we're never going to have the time where we think it's real. That's never coming back. But we could have the time where we don't care if it's real, and we have that now. But we can have it to a much greater extent where everyone is just getting lost in this crazy universe. But the logic has to be there. The logic has to be committed to, It can't just be like you insult your fans on a weekly basis with the commentary and the interference and all this nonsense. You have to actually commit to some internal logic in your universe and then actually follow that on a weekly basis.
There has to be a mission statement, so to speak.
Yeah, you can't just change the rules every week because you booked yourself into a corner. If 1 week you have
preach.
If 1 week you have a heel who does a dastardly thing and he gets away with it. If 1 week he gets away with it, but then 2 months later another heel does that, but he doesn't get away with it. To me, that's inconsistent. This is no one can follow this. It's just whatever they want on that particular day.
I look at a product like Lucha Underground and I see that they do it. Like, for example, if you're a WWE fan and WWE is all you know, and you're used to things like CM Punk pipe bomb promo and the storyline involving Danny Bryan and this whole thing that they attempt to sell with us, this reality thing. You look at Lucha Underground and what is this cartoonish bullshit? But I look at that as all that we're talking about right now, that is being reflected in Lucha Underground. That's the type of show that they could have a match, a casket match, where the guy gets put in a casket, he loses, and then he comes back a few months later, and you can actually see the loss in the casket match. It's reflected in his current character, and he brings on these druids. They're called the Disciples of Death, and they do some zany type stuff with them in the backstage segments where they'll you'll blink and then all of a sudden they're appearing behind you and things like that. And I think that that's okay, because that is the standard that Lucha Underground sets, and that's the standard that they follow from a week to week basis. The thing is, with WWE, we'll see some things that happen. For example, a few weeks ago, who was it? Triple H. He was backstage with Seth Rollins and J&J Security, and he tells J&J Security to leave the room so he can talk to Seth Rollins alone. Leave the room so he can talk to Seth Rollins alone.
With the camera there, right?
Yeah, with the camera right there, as if he can't walk out in the fucking hallway and watch it on the monitor. Like,
yeah, that's one of those little things that's just really, like, sometimes you don't think about it because you have to, like, if you think about it too much, it just annoys you too much. But it's like, yeah, it's stupid, and it's such an easy fix too.
Jay, you used the word earlier that kind of caught my attention, and we've used the word before, and it's organic. Mm-hmm. I think there's way too many forced things nowadays in WWE. Things are just kind of forced. So like we were talking about the Andre Battle Royal and how it's prestigious because it's Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. No. There's got to be a reason why it is prestigious. You got to give me reasons. There is not enough proof in the pudding for most of the stuff that they are doing right now. And I think it also relates to the gimmick pay-per-views that you have. Those need to fucking go. Okay, the Hell in a Cell and TLC like that. Those matches are supposed to be a piece of a feud that they are only done when it fits into the feud or fits into something that actually can make some semblance of sense, That's why those matches were created in the first place. Like when it was the Hardys and Dudleys and Edge and Christian, with the TLC concept, like it was to redefine tag team wrestling. There was a reason why they had those matches, and they have those matches because there is a personal edge to the feud. There is a reason to have them. Instead, if you just have a pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell, whatever the damn WWE title feud is in a Hell in a Cell, just because it's a pay-per-view that's there. So again, it's forced into it, whereas you should only have a Hell in a Cell match like they did with like Triple H and Taker at Mania 28. There was a reason that they were in that Hell in a Cell. It was personal. That feud had to be that way, and it was a damn good match because it felt real. It felt like there was something to gain or lose in that match for both guys, and that's the essence right there. Is you cannot force things in pro wrestling, and they are forcing so many different things, and that is why I think also that the quality it continues to degrade.
And we have someone in the chat right now, JJJ89515, saying the TLC pay-per-view needs to go. Praise him. That is one of my biggest gripes about WWE, especially with this new marketing tactic that they have with that show. They call it the Demolition Derby of WWE. And I hate how the friggin' announcers, every time that they talk about this, oh my God, like, this is going to be crazy. This is going to be insane. It's insane, the fact that you have glee over people brutalizing themselves. Like, I think that that's one thing the WWE needs to do as well. Like, return to, hell, you want to talk about the reality era, talk about how crazy it is for people to get into the ring and hit each other with chairs and ladders and things like that. Like, that's not something that you're supposed to be excited about. It's okay for us as fans to be excited about it, but if you're a narrator to the story, you kind of have to get wrapped up in that story. That's one of those things where it's like you kind of lack a bit of consistency, because on the side of things where I was talking about earlier, where the announcers, they have to play dumb, they have to play along with the cage match type thing, but in this one, you're acting like you're a regular old fan. That can't work. Like, you have to talk about how the things that happen in those matches, they have consequences and things like that. Like, people are going to get hurt. Like, when I look at the TLC pay-per-view, I look at that as just mindless violence. Like, you're just throwing people on there to get thrown around just for our amusement and things like that. But if it doesn't mean anything as far as the storyline goes, then what was it for? Like, if you don't give these people a purpose to be out there and hitting each other and things like that, and then it doesn't really mean much, because it's not going to be memorable at all. Like, who the hell is still talking about what happened between Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose? Nobody.
I think Dean Ambrose might just be the epitome or the embodiment of this whole problem, because he's one of those guys that's like, okay, send out Dean Ambrose to do something wacky with a weapon. Like, give him a chair, give him a table, and that's why Dean Ambrose's character is floundering right now, because he's just embodying this whole like demolition derby, like stupid, just excuse to have a weapon out there, even though there's no blood, there's no shots to the head. It's like, okay, well, if you're not going to do that stuff, and I understand why you don't want to do that stuff, but if you're not going to, then don't have it, because it makes no sense why in the storyline these guys can hit each other with stuff, but they won't do chair shots to the head. I mean, that just makes no consistent sense.
And that's more evidence of them living in the past still.
Yeah, it is. And I want to go back to you mentioned Lucha Underground. I think that and NXT are like the two places where we're seeing what wrestling really should be right now. Mm-hmm. And it's just the main roster isn't catching up. It's because it's right there in their own company. It's not every episode of NXT and it's not every match, but I think we see like a general trend in NXT where this is like a serious product. The announcers take it seriously.
Yeah, and obviously you're not going to see everything be perfect no matter what, and that is not what anybody here is asking for. We're just asking for a more consistently good product that...
I mean, you watch Lucha Underground, but, you know...
yeah, no, and...
I'm not saying everything is perfect there, but hell, damn near it. Once again, I'll say, most consistently good wrestling product out there, best on TV, and it's going to end next week.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of how like ECW set the tone for the Attitude Era. This is like... NXT and Lucha Underground, I hope they'll set the tone for the next era in wrestling, but I don't know if it's going to happen.